talking about Antisense Therapeutics today, ASX code ANP. We have with us the non-executive director, Charmaine Gittleson. Charmaine, you were previously the Chief Medical Officer with CSL. Given your professional background, what attracted you to the Antisense board?
Well, at the time that I was looking to join boards, and I only wanted to join a few so that I can give adequate attention to them, I had set myself some criteria, and Antisense meets all three. So firstly, I looked at the management of the organization, and I felt that the Antisense management, very, very solid, good experience, and a very disciplined approach to what they're doing. Secondly, I looked at the science, and I felt that this science was robust and intriguing, and I feel really deserves to be explored further in terms of an indication. And thirdly, I looked at the population or the indication, and I've been in rare disease research for a long time, and I'm passionate about it. I see this as a community that requires or needs, additional medications to treat their high unmet need. And, I have a lot of experience working with patient communities, so it's not just the patient, it's the parents, the caregivers, the investigators. And I felt that I could bring something to this.
Now, Charmaine, you obviously have deep experience in global drug development, particularly in rare diseases, given your background with CSL. How do you see your experience assisting Antisense in development of ATL1102, which is the drug for Duchenne's muscular dystrophy?
Rare disease development is quite unique, and it's different from the general development of drugs for large populations. And I'm lucky that in my time, I've been able to work on both ends, from influenza with huge clinical trials through to rare disease indications with 10 patients in a trial. And when you work with rare diseases, you're limited in terms of the patient numbers, and often patients are spread around the world, and it's difficult to get to them, difficult for them to get to care. You really often only have one chance at doing a study with them. And drugs can fail, not because the drug doesn't work, but because the experiment that you've designed wasn't ideal. And when you've got one chance, you don't have lots of options of kind of trying it out. So I think I've had a lot of experience of having to think very strategically about the opportunities in a program, but as well the potential pitfalls and really what can trip you up. And I've had the experience of programs working, but some that haven't worked as well for those reasons. So I think what I can bring to the board specifically is a different viewpoint around assessing risk of a clinical program, and more importantly, how to mitigate that risk and bring something to fruition. And for the Antisense management team, I hope that I'm a sounding board. I'm not part of that management team. They know full well what they're doing, but I'm there as a sounding board to help guide or direct or point out things that where they could take greater opportunity of circumstances, or what they could do to avoid things going a bit wrong.
Charmaine, with respect to the US regulatory interactions, and in particular, the FDA recently gave Antisense feedback on a Type C meeting for ATL1102, which is a drug for Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. Could you explain more about the FDA process and how this Type C meeting fits into clarifying the pathway to starting a clinical trial?
So firstly, I want to mention that Duchenne's muscular dystrophy is a global disease. It can occur in patients across the world. And so engaging with the major regulatory agencies, FDA and EMA, is clearly important for ultimately being able to bring this drug to as many patients as possible. So the FDA Type C meeting is a meeting that is offered to companies to discuss potential aspects or pathways for their drug development. It was important that Antisense had this meeting with the FDA, because the last time they met with them and discussed the product, it was in relation to a different indication. So it's necessary to go back and have discussions with them and find out from FDA, if we choose to, how do we make progress with the regulatory agency? And the key things to discuss with them this time was what they require in order for the clinical trial to start in the US for this indication. And we really needed to understand, were they going to allow more than one dose to be studied? And this is important because some patients might be fine with a lower dose, but there may be patients that need a higher dose. You never want to undertreat your patients. So this was a meeting that it discussed what would they require, which was if we wanted to do a 1-year study with the product to assess the efficacy, would the work that we've done to date to demonstrate safety, and that's always where we're all most concerned about, would the work we've done to date to demonstrate safety suffice? And what FDA said was that they would like additional or longer toxicology data than what we've done to date. Not that there's a specific issue, but that their criteria for all products is that if you wish to treat the patients on an ongoing basis, so for longer than 6 months, you must have animal toxicology data that is longer than 6 months. Very often they can ask for a 1 year. But what we were able to negotiate with them was that say that we could do 9 months of toxicology data. And because of the seriousness of this condition and the desire to be able to bring something effective to patients as soon as possible, we could run part of that study concurrently with a clinical program. And we could also start the study with higher doses than what we had studied initially in the phase 2. And that's a big win for patients to be able to study the higher doses. And also the other important thing that we really needed to understand from them was what would be the end point that would be satisfactory to FDA. There is no drug registered, approved specifically for non-ambulant boys. And so we really need to understand from them what would they find as acceptable to indicate that a treatment had benefit in boys who can't stand up, who are wheelchair bound, and really all they have left in terms of mobility is some upper arm movement. And FDA was in agreement with us that the test called the Pull 2 test would be suitable for an endpoint. And that was really positive news because our phase 2 study, which is the only phase 2 study in non-ambulant Duchenne boys, used the Pull 2 test. So that gives us confidence that in seeing what we have from the phase 2, we could potentially pull forward into the next study. So this is an outcome from the FDA that allows us to explore optionality for the United States. The organization management team is very focused on the EU and far along with being able to move into the next study for the EU. But as I said, it's important to have a look at the US. And this gives us the option to start working towards the US at a time that suits and is convenient for the organization. It also opens up the opportunity to use that data that we would generate from the toxicology study to pursue other indications in the US should the organization wish to do that. So this is a really important step in the overall program for Antisense.
Charmaine Gittleson, thank you for your time.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.